Hello, this is Roy Kessel, your host, and I'm here on the Sports Philanthropy Podcast. Today, we're very excited to have with us Diana Hosford. Diana is the VP of Sports and Entertainment for TAPS. Diana, welcome to the show.
It's so lovely to be with you. Thanks for having me.
We're very excited to learn more about TAPS. And why don't we start with having you tell us what TAPS is and explain a little bit about the organization. And then I'd love to go through some of your background so people understand how you got to this point.
Oh, great. TAPS is the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors. We care for the families of fallen military service members. TAPS was founded in 1994 by Bonnie Carroll after her husband was killed in an aviation crash in Alaska with 7 other soldiers. Her husband was Brigadier General Tom Carroll. And after that, Bonnie really found that there was a hole in the world, really, that there was no one providing care and comfort to the families of fallen military. There was the military who did a dignified burial and the government to administer benefits, but there was no one to provide the care and comfort needed for survivors along the grief journey. So Bonnie started the organization. And since then, we've provided services to more than 90,000 surviving military families across America.
Well, that's a big number as you look at everything that goes on when somebody's going through that tragedy. It's a very difficult time in their life. And as you said, there's some of those elements that get a lot of focus and attention in terms of how people are coming about and what they're doing. And then there's other areas along there where it really doesn't come together. So before we spend more time diving into all of the work that TAPS does now, why don't you give us a little bit of your background in terms of where you grew up and went to school and what kind of led you this direction?
Well, I'm a New Yorker, proud New Yorker. I've lived in Washington, D.C. for more than 20 years. Whenever I meet anyone and they say, "Where are you from?" I always say I'm a New Yorker who lives in Washington, D.C., even though I've been here for so long. I went to American University and studied mass communications with a minor in psychology. And interestingly enough, right out of college, I went to work in television news. And I really loved that, enjoyed it very much. That's where I met my husband. And then I really started to think about my skills and where would I be able to help people and how could I engage and support. So the nonprofit world was very appealing. And I left news and went to work for Special Olympics headquarters in Washington, D.C. and was there for 7 years. And I always say that that was the best job in the world at that time in my life. And it was really an opportunity to learn what it was that I wanted to do and use skills to support the organization, to support the Special Olympics athletes. And they had a motto years ago called Training for Life. And I always said that working at Special Olympics was like training for life because I did so many different things that it really allowed me to build a wonderful skill set to move on to the next phase in my life. I left there and after I had a baby and did various other things. And then I worked for the Washington International Horse Show, which is an Olympic qualifier, equestrian event in Washington, D.C. And I went in to build their programming, their military programs, their community programs, their cultural programs. And I was there for about 5 years. And I brought TAPS in as a partner for the military program. I didn't know much about the military. My father was a World War II veteran who passed away when I was a little girl, but I didn't really know much about the military and not very much about the equestrian world either. But I knew that there was a wonderful opportunity to build something special at the horse show, especially because it was an urban event. So I looked at what was the real estate? What did this horse show have that no other show had? The fact that they were urban in a city, Washington, D.C., the diplomatic corps, the culture, and the military. Military horses are the horses that are at Arlington National Cemetery that are part of the dignified burials for fallen service members are housed right outside of Washington and Arlington. And so as part of building a military program, I said we should do something with the horses at Arlington. And I had gotten word that TAPS, a military charity that helps the families of the fallen, had written a children's book about the military horses. And so as I was building the program, what made the most sense was to bring TAPS in as a charity partner. And this was 2008 or 2009. And it just all started from there. I picked up the phone, I called Bonnie Carroll, and I said, I work with the horse show. Would you be interested in being part of what we're doing and working with your families and raising some money for you? And we worked together for 5 years. And then I decided to leave the horse show. I sort of give myself a 5-year expiration on a job or a project. It's either going to flourish and grow or it's not. And so I always feel like 5 years is where I am. I've been at TAPS for more than 7, so I guess I can't really say that anymore. But anyway, it was we're at the horse show at Kids Day with the military horses and the TAPS children. And Bonnie said, "This is so great. Can we do it again next year?" And I said, "Well, I think I'm going to leave the horse show and move on to something else." And I already had a job in mind that I was thinking I would like. And Bonnie said, "Come and work for TAPS. Come and do it for the children." And as I mentioned earlier, my father passed away when I was a little girl. So the idea of doing something to help other kids who'd lost their parents really felt like something special. So I said, "I'll do this for a year." And then I started working for TAPS, and inside of 6 weeks working there, Bonnie asked me to go to Afghanistan with her. And the news person in me came back a little bit, and I came home and I told my husband that Bonnie had asked me to go to Afghanistan, and he said, "You should go for it." And so we did all the things. We talked to Central Command. We got all the appropriate things we needed to be on base, to have support from the military, so that we could go and meet with some of the people that were working with our soldiers whose loved ones had died. So some of the women in Afghanistan. And it was a life-changing experience for me. And I didn't realize it was going to be that until I got there, and I looked at this country and everything that they were going through. And I joke that Teams for TAPS was born on a sleepless night on base in Kabul. I was lying in my little quarters, and I just started thinking about what I needed to bring back from this experience, that I couldn't just come here and have it be a boondoggle or just some kind of thing that I did. I wanted to have something evolve from this that would be beneficial for the charity. And so I started thinking about sports and the universality of sports and how it brings people together in the most meaningful ways, and how family memories are built in sports and connections are made. And we were on the plane home from Kabul, and I said to Bonnie, "I think I want to start a sports program." And she said, "Go for it." And that's really how I got. I guess that's the whole progression of from college to 7 years ago.
Well, it sounds like you've had some amazing experience in terms of, I know the impact Special Olympics has on so many families and so many athletes. I have a younger sister that's developmentally disabled, and she participated in Special Olympics when we were both younger. And even though she's not very athletic, it was one of her prideful things. And she did the softball throw, and she did the 50-yard dash, which was not quite a dash, but she made it through the 50 yards, and it was a big accomplishment for her. And she loved that because she would always come and sort of like to pitch a baseball or a softball with me when I was playing ball, and she would want me to throw with her. So she loved doing that. So I know what an impact that makes. And I think one of the things that's always challenging for people who look from the outside that haven't worked somewhere is to get a real understanding of how much sports touches the lives of those that are involved in. So seeing them get an opportunity, and we do a whole array of programming, and there's with disabilities, we've done podcasts with people with disabilities, we've done webinars with and town hall meetings on adaptive sports, and there's a whole array of ways sports make an impact in every community. And so seeing what you did with Special Olympics and then tying TAPS in, I think is a fantastic opportunity. I'd love to hear more about what you do to engage the teams in terms of having them support TAPS work.
What really was important to me was to find a way for teams to engage and have it be really meaningful for the families. for them to be able to honor and celebrate the life and service of their loved one with the teams and athletes that they cheered for when their hero was alive. So we reach out to teams when we get stories from survivors. So surviving family may reach out and say, my husband was the biggest Yankees fan, and he got married in his we actually had a survivor. He got married in his Yankees jersey. And he had worked at the ballpark when he was younger. And so they had this great story, and she lost her husband. He died in service in Afghanistan, and she has three little boys, and they came up to Yankee Stadium, and we were doing an event with the Yankees on July 4th. So to be able to honor and celebrate life and service on July 4th at Yankee Stadium, children took the field with the Yankees with their hands over their hearts for the national anthem. They spent some time on the bench. At the time, was Joe Girardi was the coach. He gave the kids gum. So they're all chewing gum, hanging out on the bench, having this great moment, thinking about how their dads or their moms were with them, in that moment. And then they all go to take the field, and you can't have a child standing on the field in their tap shirt honoring their parent chewing gum. So they're all spitting out their gum on the way out. But that whole experience, Joe giving them the gum, being on the bench, the whole thing, it was just a beautiful moment to be able to celebrate. We've been so fortunate because Major League Baseball has been incredible. The Nationals were our first team. So just to step back, I'll say that when we launched, we got back from Afghanistan in mid-April. I took about 6 months to really think about what made sense, how to get teams involved, and how to make it appealing to them. The last thing I wanted to do was build something and say, hello team, you have to do all of these things in order to be part of our TAPS family. So it's really turnkey. And so we launched November 1st in 2013 with the Washington Capitals. They have been an incredible supporter, probably donations of over $1 million since we've started working with them. And the idea was really to raise funds, raise awareness, and create meaningful opportunities. So we had the Caps, and they're amazing. They have been supportive. The kids skate with the Caps. The families connect with them. They do a fundraising campaign. It's really extraordinary. The whole team at the Washington Capitals has been amazing. So we started with the Caps. A week later, we got the Washington Wizards. Same owner, and a lot of the same staff. So that was great. I think they really liked what we were doing, and we loved working with them. So then I thought, well, if we can find success in one city on all fronts, if we can raise funds, raise awareness, create meaningful opportunities with every team in one city, we can grow. And that was what I wanted to do. And then we had the Nationals come in, the Redskins, DC United, the Washington Spirit, the Washington Castles, City Open. We had a relationship with the horse show. So it was like if there was anything with a ball, a bat, a field, a rink, a horse, a tennis racket, anything, we wanted to have everybody in one city. And then we grew. And we went to Oakland, we went to Boston, we went to Atlanta, we went to New York. And we're able to really develop wonderful relationships because at that time we had, and I guess sort of overall, we'd found a niche in sports that didn't really exist before, that the military, when teams would honor military, they would often honor active duty, veterans, or the wounded, and that they hadn't really honored the fallen heroes' families, the loved ones left behind from service and sacrifice. So being able to share those stories with them, and we build the stories and we build the opportunities based on families who have connections to the team, whether it was that spouse whose husband wore the Yankee jersey on their wedding day, or a child who used to watch the Atlanta Falcons with his dad. Every Sunday that was their ritual, and then that dad dies in service, and then the opportunity for the child to come and honor their loved one. So the NFL's been tremendously supportive. We are a salute to service partner and incredibly grateful for their support. Overall, an incredible number of teams have come in to support us, and the league itself. And then the NBA has been also a tremendous partner. The story I can share with you about the NBA was a pretty special one. One of the things that TAPS does is we are open to anyone who is grieving the loss of a loved one in the military, regardless of the circumstance of the death or relation to the deceased. So if you're a surviving parent, a surviving spouse, surviving kids, aunt or uncle, or a sibling, but also the circumstances of the death. So if if it was killed in action death, a suicide death, illness, in this current climate, we're seeing a lot more illness loss come, especially as we're all fighting COVID and our military is stepping forward to support those efforts. And so we were doing an event at the National Press Club, and a surviving father, all of 39 years old, stood up at the podium to share the story of his son. And he said, he started his speech, "The last time I spoke to my son, and he was in Afghanistan, he said that the Warriors are going to win in 6. And then 2 days later, he died by suicide." And I started to cry, and I got my business card out of my pocket, and I said to him, and this was right before we were going to be part of the reveal of the Olympic team going to the games in Rio. And I grabbed my card and I walked over to him and I said, we will get you to a Warriors game. We will make that happen, and you can celebrate your son's life and service with the Warriors, and we'll make a beautiful connection. And he was overwhelmed, I think, at that. And then I said, we're also revealing we're going to be part of the reveal of the Olympic team up in New York on Monday. I think this was a Thursday or Friday. And I said, if you'd like to join us, that would be great. And he called me that morning. He lives in Maryland. And he called me that morning. He said, could I drive up to New York? Is it still okay if I come? And I said, of course, we'd love to have you. And he got in the car and he drove up to New York, and he met Coach K and he met members of the team. And it was such a meaningful experience for him. And he was so touched by the opportunity. And they were so touched by his story. They invited him to come and speak to the whole team during one of the pre-Olympics games that we did in Las Vegas. And he came with his little son. He had a little 5-year-old son. And they had the opportunity to share the story and celebrate that life and service in such a meaningful way. Now, every team in the NBA has supported TAPS. Every referee in the entire referee team has supported. They donate their tickets. They bring TAPS families into the arena and create this great opportunity. So what has happened is it's the team engagement, it's the league engagement, it's referees, it's the trainers. There's just this beautiful sense of caring and love that we get from sports that's just really meaningful.
I think you answered part of what my next question was going to be in terms of what that support looks like. So obviously, you've got to go out and raise money for a lot of the work that you do, but where does the support come from? We'll come back to the teams in a minute, but in terms of financial support, where does that typically come from?
So for TAPS as an organization, we don't take any money from the government. So it's caring Americans who want to give back and support America's family, the bereaved military family members, and then also foundations and companies affiliated with the military, defense contractors and things like that. I will also say that the amount of support that we get from the NFL and Major League Baseball, and then also the incredible amount of in-kind support. One thing that we are, I guess one of the things that when I was building this program, I had certain pillars. We had to tweet in real time because, it was important that we were sharing what was happening in the moment and being grateful. But also that we never would pay for an opportunity. We wouldn't pay to take a family to a game. That everything would be donated. Because as a charity, that's, we need to spend the funding that we have to provide the core services of TAPS, which are, it's the peer-to-peer connection, the 24/7 helpline, casework assistance, all of these things that are critical to the immediate needs of our survivors, which is, that feeling of never being alone and feeling that they can get the care and comfort that they need. So I said, if I was going to develop this new program, I wanted it not to cost the organization anything. And so we have been able to have all of these events and opportunities, whether it's, basketball games, whether it's football, hockey, NASCAR, tennis, you name it. We've been able to do them all at no cost to TAPS and no cost to the survivors. And that's been incredible. So the funding, I think I answered your funding question, and then the opportunities. So that's all in kind. So like when we did I know you're in Chicago, and the last time I was in Chicago was not that long ago. It feels like forever ago, right? It was NBA All-Star Weekend, which feels like yesterday, but also 6 months ago. Unfortunately, with everything that's happening, and it was such an incredible weekend. But we had kids who were ball kids. We had families sitting under the baskets. I mean, the unbelievable amount of in-kind support, recognition, kids holding flags at the international game. When we did the Road to Rio games with USA Basketball, which we would have done this year too, had the Olympics not been postponed. I'm sure we'll do them next year. But when we did them, they had the players wore USA Basketball shirt, logo on the front, TAPS logo on the back. I mean, they really make us feel like family. I mean, I can't express enough how much, TAPS families feel like they're part of the NBA family, the NFL family, the Major League Baseball family, the Washington Capitals family, whatever it is. It's a tremendous gift. So, and that's parts at no cost to us, even though they do fund, the NFL, for example, will fund programming to bring our families to the Pro Bowl, the NFL Pro Bowl. We have a group of, we had about 80 people this year at the Pro Bowl in Disney World, and it was absolutely incredible, absolutely fantastic. But we would not have been able to do that without the incredibly generous support of the NFL.
So when you talk about all of this support, you mentioned the NFL in particular doing a great job in taking people to the Pro Bowl. Then that funding that they're giving you is to cover or to offset the cost of the travel and accommodations and everything for the families. How do you select who gets to go? Because 80 people out of your whole population, that's a small number.
Well, you're right. And whether it's the Pro Bowl or whether it's a Milwaukee Bucks game or it's a Padres game, every opportunity is special, and every hero deserves to be honored, and the family deserves to be recognized. So what we try to do for every event, regardless of the size, is have it and make sure it's meaningful. So for a family where their big story was football, they loved football. That was their Sunday experience. Every family member has a Rams jersey. That's their thing. So we would pick that family for the Pro Bowl, as opposed to somebody who said, well, I like football, but LeBron's really my guy. So we make it meaningful so that when the family shows up to a Rams game or a Raiders game, and there's a story, there's a history, it's meaningful because it's more meaningful for the team. You meet Mark Davis from the Raiders, and he hears that the little girl he's meeting wants to be a Raiders cheerleader because she watched the Raiders with her dad for years and years and years, or both of her parents. Maybe it's a dual military family. So, so that's heartwarming for him. Opportunities where there is a meaningful connection is good for the family, and it's also good for the team. And the stories that we're able to put together will often lead to opportunities for families to be interviewed to further talk about their loved ones. But yes, for things like the Pro Bowl, which is, an incredible experience, it's 4 days in Orlando and it's Disney World and it's really lovely and meaningful. We get lots and lots of applications, and it's incredibly difficult to decide, but it really is based on what would be the most meaningful for the family, and also making sure that they're in a place in their grief journey that the experience would be positive for them. Because if someone's loss has occurred very recently, it would be very difficult for them to be in a room with other people whose loss may have been 3 years ago. And so we do try to make sure that that people are a little further down their grief journey before engaging them in that kind of a big public event, because the families are at most of our events, they are on the Jumbotron, they are meeting they're meeting their sports heroes, and or their heroes on the court and on the field. The heroes in their hearts are really the ones that are the most meaningful to them.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting when you talk about that process of the grief journey, because very frequently people will want to jump in right away after that tragedy and provide support. And that's fantastic, except that the individuals are often, as you said, at a point where they will get something out of it, but they're still in that shock phase. They're still in that acceptance phase. And so it's very challenging because just like when in most families, when somebody dies, everybody's around, right? For the funeral, in the Jewish world, for sitting Shiva, for, in other uh, wakes, everything else that are out there, there's a lot of people around. And then all of a sudden, a couple weeks later, boom, everybody's gone, right? And that's when a lot of the real grieving takes place, because now you're left to sort of fend for yourself and go through that grieving process. And it's hard to know when that right time is, because everybody goes through it at a different pace and has different needs. And I'm sure it's very challenging as you look and identify and say, okay, we're taking a group of whatever it is, 4, 6, 10 people to a Warriors game. That's very hard then to decide which of those people get to go. Are most of the things, obviously the Pro Bowl that the NFL helps support is maybe a little bit different, but most of the, I'll call them outings or sporting events that you go to with people that are part of the TAPS program, are they local to that market? In other words, in DC, is that going to mostly be people from DC versus Oakland will mostly be people from the Bay Area?
Yeah, so exactly. We do try to find families that are local for events, like a game during the season. For some events, when it is a more of a once in a lifetime experience, like we were very honored to be invited by the Washington Nationals for Game 3 of the World Series to honor their fallen heroes at the end of the third inning, which was incredibly meaningful. So we did have a couple of families who we wanted to have that really be special for people who were tremendous Nats fans. So we did have some people come from out of town to have that experience. However, when the Nats won and we were invited to march in the parade, the only military charity to have that privilege, those were our local Nats families. So yeah, it is primarily local people, but I will tell you, there are some teams that people will travel night and day through, snow, ice, sleet, and rain to get to. So if we have space in an event and there's a family from Arizona who really wants to go to a Patriots game, or somebody in Milwaukee who really wants to go to see the Cowboys, if we can make make it happen, we always try to do that. I mean, it's really about providing comfort and care to the families and joy. These families have sacrificed so much, losing their loved one in military service, the opportunity to bring them joy and think, and smile again. And also the community you bring together, like the Nats games are always such a good example. We do the salute to service at the end of the third inning. The whole stadium tips their caps and applauds, and there's on the Jumbotron pictures of the fallen heroes, and it's really very meaningful. I cry every single time. We do one it's emotional. We do one a month for the whole season with the Nats, and it's incredible. And those kinds of moments are great. And what happens is you have maybe there's usually, I think, 17. We have 17 tickets. We're sitting right behind home plate, which is great, and part of the I think it's the Delta 360 Club. So everybody is part of that area where they can go get food and things like that, which is always fun for the kids, where it's like nonstop cotton candy and peanuts and Cracker Jacks and everything else.
Lots of desserts.
Lots of desserts. And then you have maybe a couple of surviving spouses and a group of kids and a couple of siblings or a set of parents, and the bonding starts. So no matter where you are with this group of people, the connections are so seamless. The kids become, best friends right away because they know why they're there. They know that somebody that they loved died in service and that they get to honor them that day. And then, the adults kind of connect and bond in another way, whether they're spouses or siblings or parents. And so it really is healing for them to come together, and builds that community, and to be able to do it around a baseball game, a basketball game, or NASCAR race, is really special.
So if we've got people in our network that want to be able to help and provide support for the type of work that you're doing, whether it's coordinating with a team or making donations of tickets or other things like that, is there a process that you go through in terms of how you take those opportunities in, or is it really just a case by case type of model that you use?
So if people want to get involved, they can visit taps.org. There's lots of different volunteer opportunities there. If they're specifically interested in supporting something related to sports, they can reach out to me, and I'll provide my information. It'll be in the stuff that I send you. And yeah, there are loads of different ways, whether if you have a connection to a team, or someone who might want to honor a family. If you own a suite and you would like to have a surviving family join you one night for a game, I mean, we've certainly done that. There are lots of different ways to be able to support and engage. And so, yeah, I mean, if people want to help, we're always happy. And if you want to make a straight donation, you're welcome to do that too.
So you've got a lot of moving parts there in terms of coordinating tickets, in terms of transportation for the families, in terms of access to the facility and all of the plans. What's a typical lead time that you look at if somebody was trying to put together a program with you at a sporting event? How much time would you need in advance to plan that?
Well, I think it depends on the event. I will say we do an average year, 2020 will be very different, but on a typical year, we do between 200 and 225 sporting events and engagements. Wow. So everything from 2 people attending a basketball game to 300 people attending a football game and honoring their loved ones on the field and carrying the flag and a whole, assortment of things. So really depends on the size of the event. I have the best team in sports. I have to say, there's a great group of all women who work with me, and they are fantastic. So if somebody called up and said, we have 4 tickets to, if it's Wednesday and they have 4 tickets to Saturday night's game, and we could probably do a meet and greet prior to the game, we could take that on a Wednesday. We could even take it, with less time. But if we're looking to coordinate a 200-person event with, say, the San Diego, I'll say the Los Angeles Rams is a good example, or the New England Patriots, or the Atlanta Falcons, we do a process with them. So if that's an NFL game, it's a signature salute to service. So there's a salute to service game in the month of November. I don't know if you've seen that there's the players wear initials of fallen heroes on their helmets, and that's all done through TAPS. So the team reaches out to us and says, we would like to honor TAPS families, and then we work out all the details with them. As much notice as possible from the team is appreciated, just because a lot goes into that. We want to block the date. We've had events, the month of November 2019, we had 54 events in the month of November. So it was a lot. So we're a lot of times doing multiple things at once. But for a game like a salute to service game with the NFL, or a game where we have players and families spending a lot of time together, we will create bios on the fallen hero and the family, so the player knows who they're meeting, maybe knows whose initials they're wearing. It's a really beautiful program. Jessica Harper on my team has done an extraordinary job kind of mapping out the blueprint of what's needed to create that kind of event. So as much lead time as possible. However, the first year we did a great one with the Panthers. It was wonderful, meaningful. We had like 3 months notice, and about 3 weeks before the same weekend, the Redskins had reached out and they wanted 300 survivors on the field holding American flags and the service branch flags. And they were going to do a roll call of all of the fallen heroes. And I think it was Lee Greenwood saying, "God bless the USA." Bonnie Carroll, our founder, was the the honorary captain. And so we could do that in 3 weeks because we didn't need the bios. We just needed, to bring out our TAPS family to that event. I mean, so it really depends on the event, but as much notice as possible, I'm sure, is what most people would say.
Right. And it sounds like you've got a great diversity of programs and a strong staff that can handle that. If you're doing 200 to 225 events a year, that means you rarely have more than a day off at a time where there's not an event. And so I'm sure your staff is well versed at handling that and kind of rotating through who's in charge of each event. Do you, as a staff, then travel to all of those locations? There's somebody from your staff at every one of those events?
We do our best to have a sports and entertainment staff member at every event. Sometimes it's just not possible, or it's just not financially feasible. So, if we're traveling to, New York to do a Knicks game, that we're all in Washington, D.C. My whole team is based in Washington, D.C. That's not too tough, to just go up to New York on the train. But if there's if there's let me think of it, if there's a game in California and, I'd have to fly someone out, they have to stay a couple nights airfare or a couple nights at a hotel, it might make more sense to try to find a regional staffer or a peer mentor who's a survivor who has been down the journey a little bit longer, had been on her TAPS grief journey a little bit longer and can support other families. So we try always to have a support person there and not just send a family on their own, but it can be a lot of travel.
Well, and hopefully if you need it, then that's an area we could be a resource. We've worked with a lot of groups and a lot of other military groups and sports groups where maybe we can help alleviate some of that if you're looking for people in different markets. So hopefully you'll feel free to reach out. And I know our network has a strong depth of resources that would be available if we put the word out that we're looking for somebody in a particular market. So I encourage you to take advantage of that as the need arises. It certainly sounds like you've touched a lot of people. The number of events is truly is overwhelming what you've built that up into. That's an incredible feat. I know from putting together events how many details go into it, and a lot of people don't necessarily understand or appreciate it, right? They show up at a sporting event and all right, there's everything is there, everything is ready, and they only notice something if it goes wrong, not how many, just like the same with flights or anything else, right? You notice if your luggage gets lost, but you don't think about how many steps and processes that piece of that suitcase has to go through to get to your location from when you drop it off at the sky cap on the way into the airport. So it's a lot of moving parts. I give you guys a lot of credit for that, and I think you've shared some great information. We appreciate your time, and before I let you go, I want to put you on the spot here and kind of switch paces. Now you've talked a lot about football and all of the things that you've seen and that you've done, but let's talk a little bit now about using our sports philanthropy superpowers and giving you control of one sport. What sport would you choose to take control of?
Well, I'm a huge tennis fan. My first love of sports is definitely tennis, bond I had with my dad. So definitely tennis. But I love the game. I love how it's played. So I don't know if I would have any challenges with tennis, but I think if I had other superpowers and could make changes within sport, is that your next question?
Sure.
Am I sensing that? Am I superpower sensing it?
Superpower sensing it.
Probably, equal pay for women. I think especially with the NWSL, who's one of our newest league partners. They are some of the most amazing athletes in the world, not just female athletes, but just athletes in general. And so I went to the World Cup in France, and we've had NWSL teams honor our families. We've done things with U.S. soccer. So I think, equal pay for women would across sports would be what I would wave my magic wand.
Well, it's certainly something that's long overdue in many of these sports. And I think that, as people look at what's going on now with the COVID crisis and sitting at home, and people are really giving thought to what's out there, oftentimes you'll hear the justification for not paying women as much, relating to TV ratings or attendance or things like that. And there's, uh, I think, certainly a chicken and egg type of theory, in terms of people will watch what's on and what they were taught to watch and trained to watch. And you take tennis is really probably one of the best examples. Like, why is women's tennis at the same level in terms of viewership and interest as men's tennis? Is because at a lot of the tournaments, right, it was both groups playing together, certainly at the majors, right? At Wimbledon, at the US Open, at the French Open, right? You've got the competition going on both levels at the same time, same place, same audience, and a lot of the women's sports have developed even more interest. That's not the way most other sports platforms have been captured, other than the Olympics, right? And again, you look at the Olympics and look at the ratings for the women's sports in terms of gymnastics and swimming and soccer and other things at that level. And once again, it's very much on par or better than many of the men's sports. And so I think it just shows you that if you get that forum and opportunity to put women's sports in front, and not necessarily side by side where they have to be competing on the same field, but you're really talking about, at the end of the day, the compensation relates to the entertainment value much more than, in a sense, the pure competition, right? So you're going to look at it and say, why should the women that are providing the same, women's soccer is a perfect example. You look at the disgraceful way that US Soccer handled the lawsuits and the filings with the women's soccer team, and the accusations of why they're not getting paid, and really trying to come up with economic justifications to reduce their pay. It's quite a disturbing stance.
Well, I just would think it would be amazing to have them compensated and have them given the recognition and the respect, even when it comes to their playing surfaces, where they're playing, their locker rooms, all of that stuff, all of those things. They are incredible role models for our young people in this country who are playing soccer. I say that as a soccer mom. I have to admit I'm a soccer mom. My daughter plays.
Well, Diana, thank you very much for coming on with us today. It was really interesting to learn more about TAPS and get an understanding on how we as a Sports Philanthropy Network and a lot of the organizations that are part of us can help and support the work that TAPS is doing, and at least become aware of where there's opportunities to tie that in with their programs or with their participants. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. It was a joy to be here, and such a privilege to talk to you from my home. During this time to talk about sports while we're not playing. It's nice to be able to speak about sports and think to when we'll be able to get out there again.
This is Roy Kessel signing off for the Sports Philanthropy Podcast. We hope you'll join us for our next episode. Thank you.